Montana Territory, June 1883. The sky was bruised with storm and smoke when the widow first stopped speaking. The town of Elmswood had watched her unravel without quite knowing what to do. Her name was Kenzie Ellard, 26, with a face too young for the heavy mourning she wore like armor. 6 months ago, her husband had been pulled under a wagon during a cattle drive gone wrong. He died before sunrise, and by sunset, Kenzie had buried him with her own hands behind their cabin at the edge of town. Not one soul had heard her voice since. She stayed in that cabin like it might fall apart if she left it. The curtains stayed drawn. No smoke rose from the chimney. She did not come into town for flour or kerosene. Some folks whispered she had gone mad. Others said she was praying, waiting for a sign. But none of them knocked on her door, except for one man. Asher Decker had not been in Elmswood long, just over a year. He was a cowboy in his early 30s, quiet-eyed, broad-shouldered, with a comfort in silence that made most people uneasy. He worked cattle for the McGrath Ranch, slept in the bunkhouse or under the stars, and had a way of watching the world like it was always saying something worth hearing. The first time he saw Kenzie, it was weeks after her husband's funeral. She stood barefoot in her garden, just standing. No movement, no sound. Her dark hair was loose and wild around her shoulders, and her eyes looked straight through him like he was the wind. He tipped his hat anyway. That night he baked bread. It was not fancy, just flour, water, salt, and patience. He wrapped it in cloth and left it on her porch before dawn. No note, no knocking, just the warm scent of something meant to nourish. The next morning the cloth was gone, so he did it again. Every third day a rhythm, not a demand. He left bread at her door, sometimes oat, sometimes rye, once with dried apples, once with rosemary. She never answered, but the bread was never wasted. He never saw her take it, but he started to notice little things. The curtains shifted once as he walked away. One morning, a fresh sprig of lavender had been tied to the empty cloth he left behind. Then spring turned to summer. The grass grew tall and green around her cabin. The rest of the world kept turning. But Asher did not stop. He did not bring flowers or ask questions. He just kept showing up. And one morning, as the sun rose pale and gold over the pines, he found more than an empty cloth. There was a note. It was folded and tucked under the bread he had brought. The paper was rough, the ink faded, but her handwriting was steady. You do not have to keep bringing it, but thank you. He read it twice. Then he smiled, not big, just enough. The kind that settled somewhere behind his ribs and stayed there. The next time he brought bread, he left a note too. You are welcome, and I do not mind the walk. 2 days passed. Then another note came. You are kind. That is all. After that, it was not just bread and notes. Asher cleared the weeds from her path without being asked. He chopped firewood and stacked it neatly by her porch. One evening, he left a small bag of coffee beans and a tin cup. She did not reply, but the next morning, the cup was hanging from a nail on the porch rail, clean and waiting. Then came the thunderstorm. It rolled down from the mountains fast and loud, shaking the windows and flooding the creek beds. Asher was near the Ellard cabin when he heard the first crack of lightning too close to ground. He looked up and saw smoke. Her chimney fire. He sprinted the last 100 yards, boots sliding in the mud. The door was closed. No answer when he pounded on it. "Kenzie!" he shouted against the wind. "Open the door." Nothing. He kicked it in. The fire was small. A pot had boiled over on the stove and flared. She had tried to put it out, but the smoke had overwhelmed her. She was on the floor, coughing, eyes wide and wild but alive. He lifted her without a word and carried her into the rain. She clung to him, soaked and shaking, and for the first time she spoke. "I could not breathe." "I know," he said. "You are all right now." She looked at him like she had never really seen him before. I thought I was going to die in there. You did not. She studied his face, water dripping from her chin. Her voice came back in pieces, soft and hoarse. You keep showing up. I will keep doing it. Kenzie blinked. Her hands were still gripping his shirt like she had forgotten to let go. Why? He hesitated, then said, because I want you to remember you are not alone. She did not answer, but she leaned her forehead against his chest and let herself stay there, the first touch she had allowed since the day she buried her husband. After the storm passed, he helped her clean the cabin. He did not ask questions. He did not try to make her talk. But that night, she poured 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. You can sit if you want, she said quietly. So he did. And when he left, she said, good night, Asher. He turned. Good night, Kenzie. The next morning, he brought bread again. This time, she opened the door before he knocked. Kenzie opened the door in a plain blue dress, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hair pinned back in a way that made her look less like a ghost and more like someone beginning to remember the weight of her own skin. Asher stood with the loaf balanced in one hand, the other resting on his belt. She looked at the bread, then at him. You came early. Mornings are quieter. She reached for the cloth bundle. Her hands were steady. You bake this yourself? Every time. She tilted her head slightly, as if she hadn't expected that. I thought maybe someone else at the ranch made them. No one there's got the patience for rising dough. Kenzie stepped back from the doorway. There's coffee on. He hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The cabin had the hush of a place long kept to itself. Dust floated near the rafters. A wooden rocker sat near the hearth, worn smooth in the arms. The table bore no clutter, just 2 tin cups and a small jar of honey. She poured the coffee without speaking, but her movements were precise, practiced. He took the cup from her hand and sat across from her without waiting to be asked. After a quiet moment, she said, I used to hate the sound of wood settling. He looked up. It made the house feel empty, like it was breathing without anyone in it. It's not empty now. Her gaze didn't lift, but something in her mouth twitched, like it wanted to. That night you carried me out, she said. I don't remember much, just the rain, and your shirt being soaked through. You were half conscious. I didn't think you'd recall any of it. I remember enough. She leaned back in the chair, folding her hands in her lap, her cup untouched. I was angry when he died, she said, not looking at him. Not just grief, real bone-deep anger. He left me with nothing but this land and 100 memories I didn't ask to carry alone. He didn't interrupt. I didn't speak because I was afraid if I did, it'd all come out at once. That I wouldn't stop until there was nothing left in me. You're not empty either. She looked at him then. Really looked. You say things like that so easy. Like you already know. I know what it is to be left behind, he said, quiet and sure. And I know when someone's still standing, even if they think they're not. She let the silence stretch out after that, but not unkindly. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup, and the light from the window caught the curve of her cheek. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in waxed paper. I brought something else. Thought you might like something sweet. She unfolded it carefully. Inside was a square of molasses cake, dark and soft. She looked at him, one brow raised. You bake cakes too? Only when it's worth the trouble. That a compliment? Maybe. She broke off a piece and tasted it slow. Then she nodded once, just enough to say it mattered. I used to make cakes like this, she said. Before. You still can. Maybe. The wind picked up outside, brushing the pine branches against the roof. Her eyes drifted toward the window, then back to him. Do you ride out every day? Most. Depends on the herd. You always come this far just to leave bread? I didn't mind. She stood and walked to the hearth, then returned with a folded square of linen. For the next one, she said, holding it out to him. He took it, careful not to let their fingers brush. I'll bring it warm. She didn't answer, but her eyes lingered on him as he stood. At the door he paused. You want me to keep coming? She lifted her chin slightly. If you stop, I'll have to start baking again. And I don't remember if I still know how. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting the smallest bit. I'll see you soon, Kenzie. Don't forget the honey next time. I won't. Asher stepped onto the porch, the morning sun just beginning to warm the grass. Behind him, the door stayed open a few inches longer than it needed to. By late July, the river had thinned and the fields turned the color of toasted wheat, brittle underfoot. Kenzie's garden yielded uneven rows of late carrots and one stubborn patch of mint. She dug with her hands, dirt under her nails, sweat darkening the back of her neck. When she stood, she found Asher leaning against the fence, hat shadowing his eyes. You ride all this way just to watch me pull weeds? I came for the bread cloth, he said, holding up the folded linen she'd given him. She brushed her palms along her skirt. That's a long ride for a square of cotton. I like the view. She squinted at him, then turned back to her crop. The mint's gone wild. Can't use it fast enough. Dry it. Hang some inside. She straightened, one brow raised. You giving me homemaking advice now? I've lived in bunkhouses where the stink could knock a man flat. I know the value of a good smell. Kenzie huffed, not quite a laugh. She walked over, holding out a dirt-streaked bundle of carrots. You'll take these, then. Trade for the bread. He took them carefully like they might break. Fair deal. A breeze caught the edge of her apron. She watched it twist, then stilled it with one hand. Do you always know what to say? She asked. No. I just wait until the right words show up. She shifted her weight, eyes scanning the horizon before resting on him again. I dreamed last week that I was packing a wagon for somewhere else. Couldn't see where. Just knew I had to go. Was anyone with you? No. That's what woke me. The silence. He didn't fill it. Just let her stand in it until she was ready. I've lived here 5 years, she said. When we first came, I thought it'd be for good. But now the quiet feels heavier than it used to. He nodded once. Sometimes a place holds too much. She looked at the cabin, then at her hands. I don't know what I'd do with myself anywhere else. You'd find something. Her gaze flicked up, sharp. You think I'm still that person? Capable of something new? I think you're not done. The wind picked up again. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold. I keep thinking about the fire, she said. Not the smoke or the fear, just how fast it could have ended. It didn't. No, because you were there. He watched her for a long moment. You ever wonder why I kept coming? I stopped wondering. Figured maybe you needed the walk more than I needed the bread. That true? I don't know, she said, voice low. But I didn't want to be someone who scared kindness away. You never did. She looked at him again, longer this time. You ever lose someone and felt like it changed the shape of your days? Yes. What did you do? Started making bread, he said. That earned the softest curve of her mouth, something nearly warm. I think I might try again, she said. With the cake. I have molasses. We could make it together. Kenzie blinked, the idea foreign enough to sit quiet in her mind a moment before she nodded. I'll need help lighting the stove. I'll bring matches. They stood there, neither moving, until she asked, Are you working tomorrow? No. Then come after sunrise. I will. Asher turned, her carrots under one arm, and started toward the trees. Behind him, the garden gate creaked open and closed again. Her footsteps padded after him until they stopped at the porch. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He felt the shift in the air, the way her silence no longer held distance, only space enough for something new to grow. The morning she baked again, the sun had barely cleared the trees. Kenzie stood at her table, sleeves rolled high, hands in a bowl of flour and lard. Her apron was dusted to the waist, and the molasses sat uncorked nearby, thick and dark as creek mud. She hadn't used the recipe in over a year, but her hands remembered. Not by measurement, but by feel the right weight of batter, the scent when the ginger bloomed. The door creaked behind her. She didn't turn. "You said after sunrise," she said. "You're late." Asher stepped inside, brushing dust from his coat. "I figured you'd need time to remember where you put the tin." "I never forgot. I just didn't want to look at it." He glanced at the jar of buttermilk on the counter. "You let it sour? On purpose." He nodded, then reached for the wooden spoon. "Mind if I stir? I'll judge you for it." He grinned around the corner of his mouth and took the spoon anyway. She watched him fold the batter slow, careful not to overwork it. "You always this methodical?" she asked. "Ranch work teaches a man not to rush what doesn't want rushing." Kenzie leaned against the table's edge, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The room smelled of cloves and warming sugar. "Did you ever think about settling somewhere?" she asked. "Not just drifting from one herd to another?" "I have." Her eyes narrowed. "And I never had reason to stay before." She didn't look away, and neither did he. "I used to think this house would fill itself with time," she said. "Laughter. Children, maybe." Then the walls just held echoes. "They don't have to anymore." She said nothing to that, only turned back to the oven. It was already warm, the heat thick in the air, softening the butter she'd set out. She unwrapped the pan, greased it and held it out. "Pour it in." He scraped the batter in smooth and even, then handed it back. When she slid it into the oven, she exhaled like something tightly wound had loosened. "You ever been married?" she asked. "No, why not?" He ran a hand along the back of his neck. "Didn't meet anyone I wanted every day with." She turned, brow raised. "That's a high bar." "It should be." Kenzie leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I was 19 when I married. Thought I knew what forever meant. Most folks don't until they're in it. I thought grief would pass like a fever, but it settled in my chest like a second heartbeat." He stepped closer, voice quiet. "And now?" She looked at him, long and steady. "Now I think it's still there, but quieter." He nodded. "That's how it goes." They fell into silence, the kind that held no tension, just understanding. The cake began to rise, scent deepening, curling through the room like memory. "Tell me something true," she said. He rested his hip against the table, arms folded. "I memorized the sound your gate makes when it latches. Been listening for it every time I leave." Her eyes softened. "That's true. Every word." The oven hissed faintly as the batter set. Outside, a hawk cried, circling over the trees. Kenzie walked to the window and watched it rise. "I used to think I'd never speak again," she said. He didn't respond, just waited. "But then you didn't ask me to." Asher stepped beside her, close enough to feel the warmth from her shoulder. "I just wanted to be near." She turned toward him, and for the first time, she didn't look guarded. "I know." The timer, a simple brass bell she hadn't touched in months, clicked. She pulled the cake free, golden and cracked across the top, steam curling from its edges. Without a word, she cut 2 slices and set them on the table. They sat, forks in hand, the windows open to the morning. Tasted like something remembered and not feared. When they finished, She picked up his plate. "You should stay for supper," she said. Asher met her eyes. "What are you making?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to figure it out with you." He nodded once. "Then I'll stay." By late August, the days had shortened just enough to make the evenings linger. Kenzie stood at the edge of the porch with her hands on her hips, watching the light slip through the trees like it was in no hurry to leave. The air smelled of pine sap and warm dirt. Behind her, the scent of cooked beans and stewed tomatoes drifted from the kitchen. Asher had arrived earlier that day with a saddlebag full of kindling and 2 tin pails, one filled with creek water, the other with gooseberries he'd found clinging low to wild bushes near the ridge. He'd handed them to her without ceremony, and she'd pulled a small smile without even meaning to. Now he sat on the porch step, sharpening a whittling knife with slow, thoughtful strokes. A thin coil of cedar shavings was gathering at his feet. Kenzie glanced down at him. "You ever carve anything useful? Or just turn sticks into smaller sticks?" "I made a spoon once," he said without looking up. "Wasn't proud of it." "You keep it." Threw it in the fire. It leaked. She stepped down beside him and lowered herself to the step, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Her eyes followed the path of the blade against the wood. "You ever think about leaving Montana?" she asked. "Sometimes, but I always get pulled back." "By what?" He paused, knife still in hand. "Quiet places. Rooms that don't ask much. A woman who makes gooseberry pie without needing a reason." Kenzie looked down at her hands. "I haven't made it yet." "You will." They sat quietly as twilight deepened. Somewhere far off, a lark called once and went quiet. The light caught in the strands of her hair, turning them the color of aged honey. She took a breath. "I've been thinking about selling the north field." He looked over. "That the one with the broken fence?" "Yes. It's too much for me to keep cleared, and it's not good for planting anymore." "You thinking of leaving?" "No," she shook her head. "I want to stay. But I want to make it mine. Not just a place I ended up in." He nodded. "You could build a smaller barn. Put in chickens." "I was thinking goats." He grinned. "Even better." She turned to face him. "You'd help me?" "I'd help you fence the whole territory if you asked." Kenzie watched him a long moment, then reached out and took the carving from his hands. She turned it over, examining the half-shaped handle. "You're not bad at this," she said. "I get better when someone's watching." She ran her thumb along the grain. "I'd like you to stay." "I already have." "No," she looked up at him, steady and clear. "I mean for good, not just bread and firewood. I want you here, in this house, with me." Asher set the knife aside. "You sure? I've lived 1,000 mornings in silence. But the ones with your boots on my porch feel like something I want to keep waking up to." He reached for her hand, calloused palm warm and sure against hers. "Then I'll stay." She leaned into him, slow and certain, and he met her halfway. The kiss was quiet and simple, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. When it ended, she didn't pull away. Later, they ate supper at the table with the windows open and the lantern lit low. He told her about a time he tried to break a Mustang and ended up flat in a patch of cactus. She laughed until tears slipped down her cheeks. She told him about the first time she saw snowfall in Montana, how it had made her believe in starting over. When the dishes were washed and the kitchen darkened, Asher followed her into the bedroom without words. They undressed without hurry, each movement deliberate, each touch a promise. He held her through the night, their bodies curved together like they'd always belonged that way. In the stillness, she slept without waking. Come morning, he lit the stove while she wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped outside to greet the day. The sun was just cresting the hills, casting long bands of gold across the field. She took one breath, then another, and smiled. Inside, he was already beating eggs with a fork, sleeves rolled high, hair tousled from sleep. She turned from the doorway and said, "I'll fetch the goat plans from town after Sunday." He looked up. "I'll hitch the wagon." They did fetch the plans. And they built the pen together, crooked boards and all. The goats came in late September, 2 wiry nannies and a kid with a crooked ear. They named him Clover. By the time the first frost came, the cabin had a new stovepipe, a fresh coat of whitewash, and 2 chairs on the porch built side by side. One morning, Kenzie placed her hand on Asher's chest and said, "This is home now." And it was. They married with no preacher, just her hand in his, a quiet vow shared beneath the cottonwoods behind the house. She wore her hair pinned with wild mint. He wore his cleanest shirt. No one else was there, and they wanted it that way. Through winters and dry summers, through hard seasons and easy ones, they stayed. She planted rows of beans and taught him how to tend tomatoes. He built her a smokehouse and a wooden swing beneath the elm. They never raised voices, only questions and laughter. And every week, without fail, he baked her bread.